You're listening to Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Two fans, two generations, all things Star Wars begins now.
All right, well, hello, everybody. I'm Eric Vansel.
And I'm Daryl Sanders.
And we are your hosts for this show, as we usually are. And I have to say, I'm kind of excited to talk about this topic tonight because, first of all, it's a little bit different than what we've been doing. I mean, it seems like we've been just doing a lot of Mandalorian, Rey stuff, Ahsoka. That's pretty much been the theme for the last few months.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of been the way of the Star Wars world. It's hard saying that back to back.
Yeah, I know. I know. Well, especially at 11 o'clock at night, Eastern time.
That too. But yeah, that's kind of been the way of the world so far. A lot of Mandalorian news has been popping up, whether it be a season 4 or is it going to be a movie? Is Pedro going to be in it? Is he not?
Right.
So there's a lot of stuff. But this one, though, was a little bit different. I could already foresee, if I can use the Force a little bit, I could already foresee us bashing Kathleen Kennedy in this conversation. So be advised.
Maybe not. Well, we bash her in every conversation that we have, basically.
Well, it's kind of our favorite game now.
Well, and I mean, just to set things up, pretty much what happened is a few days ago, while Adam Driver was out doing his rounds of interviews for his new movie, Ferrari, invariably, everybody always asks him Star Wars questions because it could be like 10 years after these guys have appeared in a film. I mean, look, even when Harrison Ford and those guys do interviews.
I was just about to say that.
Yeah. I mean, So the thing is, once you've actually been in Star Wars, it's pretty much guaranteed to come up in
forever will dominate your destiny.
Exactly. Every interview that you do, no matter how far removed the project may be, you're still. I mean, look, he could actually be in like a remake of Amadeus or something, and there's still going to be, but Kylo Ren, though, I mean, it's just going to be one of those things. So, they're forever going to be tied to this. And so what should come as a surprise to no one is that he was asked about, it's funny because I didn't actually read the full, there's been a lot of people that have been reporting about the interview, but I haven't actually read just like the pure interview itself. But the gist of it being that he revealed that Kylo was not supposed to be redeemed at the end of Rise of Skywalker. And in fact, when he signed on, the idea was that it was almost like he was going to go full dark side and just be pretty much a really evil villain. And did it actually say like who wrote it differently?
It didn't say who wrote it differently. I think, well, it might have been, it's probably JJ because it was retconned. Because basically, he may mention that, like, okay, when he first originally talked to JJ, this was like the original script, was that he was more Ben Solo in The Force Awakens, and he was struggling with the dark. But then, as the story progressed, by the time he got to Rise of Skywalker, he was supposed to be fully submerged into the dark. Unlike Vader, which was the opposite, Vader was fully submerged into the dark, and then closer towards the end of Return of the Jedi, he obviously, switched back over to the light. So it was supposed to be that, reversal of the thing, which would have been cool. However, Rian Johnson, once again, being the cog in the wheel, when he wrote Last Jedi, he kind of changed. Yeah, he changed Kylo's arc a bit, but it was still doable, though. It was still like, okay, because even when you look at The Last Jedi, I mean, he did go darker.
Oh, way darker.
So it's like, okay, well, cool. It wasn't exactly the same trajectory that I guess he was originally supposed to go through, I guess, but whatever. But then we get to Rise of Skywalker. Here's what I thought that was, kind of interesting, was that originally they were kind of toying with even Rey's character as well, because Rey was they had her kind of being the offspring of Obi-Wan. And I remember like when we first heard about The Force Awakens, that was one of the rumors that were going around, that she was the granddaughter or the daughter of Obi-Wan. But then it's like, okay, then it became she was supposed to be nobody, which they were kind of really hyping it up. And then once again, it was retconned in The Rise of Skywalker when they announced that she's a Palpatine. So there's a lot of changes that were going on in that particular film.
Well, and again, I mean, not that this really needs to be restated, but in the interest of context, I think that that's one of the biggest issues of when you don't plan out an entire trilogy, when you just let it go from one director to the next. Now, again, sure, Colin Trevorrow was the first director behind Episode 9, which his version would have been called Duel of the Fates. And of course, the script for that, there's a lot of YouTube shows out there that cover what that would have been like. And in fact, we even did a show on it. And we talked about the leaked script and all the plot points and stuff. So you can go back on our channel and find that if you need some context on that. But I think the big problem is that if the ending had been the way that it was supposed to be, I think a lot of the trilogy probably would have made more sense, versus when JJ came in and all of a sudden it was like a fan service thing. Now, I have to say, right from the get-go, number one, I did kind of like the fact that she was a Palpatine. I would have preferred her being nobody, but it's like, okay, if you've got to tie her to somebody, I think tying her to Palpatine made things a little bit interesting.
Yeah, it's the least likely person you would have thought of.
Right. And it also opened the door to a lot of different story things, because, okay, you got this offspring or clone or whatever, and, she also has Palpatine's power. But it's sort of like a light side kind of thing. It's almost like the same dynamic between Luke and Vader, is that you have Rey and Palpatine, and it's kind of that messed up dynamic. And of course, Vader goes and he ends up saving his son. Palpatine basically tries to either inhabit or totally kill his granddaughter, but, Palpatine, right?
Yeah, it's Palpatine. Yeah.
So
he's not changing anybody.
Yeah, exactly.
If they ever would have tried to do that, they would have completely ruined Star Wars.
Yeah,
like, obliterated it.
Right, like if he had gotten all grandfatherly or something.
Yeah, it just felt bad. Like, I kind of feel bad for my act. Like, no, it's almost kind of like if Michael Myers just felt remorseful or something like that. Like,
yeah, Palpatine being redeemed would be bad. Dragonfly Mask joins us. He says, "Hey guys, it's happening.
Hey.
Glad you're with us, so late at night." It's funny because a lot of people end up commenting on the show that this is like way past their bedtime and they'll catch it on the rebroadcast or whatever, which is fine. That's all good. Whether you're catching it live and you're chatting with us or you're watching it on pretty much on demand, like after, and that's really cool too. Just make sure you hit the like button and hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. Well, here's the other thing though. Getting into this. So that was one, right, where the whole Palpatine connection and all that stuff. I thought that, I think, ended up working. Now, here's what's interesting. And of course, when we did our initial review of The Rise of Skywalker, I brought this up. When we did our last review, which was like, what, a year ago? Whenever we did that whole, like, what is Star Wars?
What is Star Wars?
Yeah, and that was this year, I think.
Yeah, it was this past year.
Yeah, it was this past year. So, I mean, we, of course, did review, once again, The Rise of Skywalker. I brought it up then, too. I'm going to bring it up now. And that is that initially, I remember when we were speculating, even with The Force Awakens going into The Last Jedi, but especially The Last Jedi going into The Rise of Skywalker, we were heavily speculating about a possible redemption arc, because that had always been a rumor. And I remember at the time, both of us actually were vehemently against it. Like, okay, you know, I'm gonna like get the torches and pitchforks and all that out if they do this, and I was digging my heels into the ground. But I have to say that when I saw it, I had a complete change of heart, a total 180, if you will. I loved it. So much so that I'm like, man, I kind of wish that the third act had been longer because I wanted to see more Ben Solo, actually. Like, he was such a cool character that I was actually finding myself going, man, I want to see more of this versus just because, you know, everybody that watches this show, if you guys have seen our show more than a couple of months, you know that Kylo Ren is actually one of my favorite of the sequel trilogy characters. I absolutely love the Kylo Ren character. So, yeah, I really would have, at the time, thought, okay, I really want this guy to stay, you know, evil, continue on this thing, almost like you had stated earlier, being, you know, the flip side of Vader the whole shot. But I had to say, I was sold on the whole Ben Solo thing. So it is interesting to find out that was a retcon, because I actually was watching The Rise of Skywalker thinking, oh, they threw a curveball on us. I thought that was a plan all along. Of course, I should have known better, but, you know, of course it wasn't.
Well, you know, I really would have preferred Kylo still stay dark, honestly, because I think it's the cliche thing.
Well, yeah, from a storytelling perspective, absolutely.
Well, not even just from a storytelling, but from like a Star Wars storytelling perspective. Like, I think would have been more what would have been harder is Rey legitimately having to kill him.
Yeah.
Because it's like, okay, almost it's like, okay, with Ahsoka, like I think that was the thing I loved about the Ahsoka Vader thing was the fact that here's Ahsoka who's basically looked up to Anakin as her older brother. Not only just her master, but like a legit older brother and friend. And having to square up was no different than like with Obi-Wan. Like, Obi-Wan always has the hardest time when it comes to Anakin. Like on 2 occasions that we've seen, he's had the chance to just completely finish him and he won't.
Yeah.
So to see that Rey to be in that position where it's like, okay, if I don't do this, like, okay, vanquishing Palpatine is kind of like, all right, we all know what he did, so he deserves to go, and he's like the biggest bad of them all. But Kylo, the fact that you felt good in him at one point,
right,
and you just can't get him to turn, and he keeps sinking deeper to the point where it's like, okay, now I have a choice to make. Do I keep trying to save this person and hope that one day he'll wake up, or do I just finish it?
Yeah, before he has a chance to do any more damage to the galaxy, because it's like the longer that you keep waiting, hoping that this guy's going to turn back, he's killed another billion people or something. Exactly. I mean, let's not forget what he did with Starkiller Base, right? I mean, that's like the Death Star times, like 10 or whatever. Right? I mean, the thing like wiped out 5 or 6 planets, including the capital of the New Republic.
Yeah, one shot, might I add.
One shot, yeah. I mean, this guy's got a little bit of blood on his hands. So there's a couple of elements that I look at with this, jumping off of what you're saying. Number one, and this is something that I sort of wish we had been able to see with Vader. They definitely had the opportunity to do this with Kylo if they had wanted to. And again, I think you would have had to keep Palpatine out of the picture, like in the original script for this whole thing. Mm-hmm. But it would be interesting. Like I said, it was a missed opportunity with Vader, but it was especially a missed opportunity, I think, with Kylo, where you had this big bad guy. Like, if you're going to do the redemption thing, okay, what would have separated this one from Vader is if you didn't kill him off. And so now he's coming back like, guess what, everybody? I'm good now. I'm a good guy.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody, in the New Republic is like, well, but dude, you you killed like
Yeah, man. Like
millions
you,
of people and you kind of did some things and
yeah,
you'll
you
have to
wiped out a whole
forgive us.
village at the beginning.
Right.
Yeah.
And so what this does for the audience is, on one hand, we're rooting for him because we know the change is legitimate as the audience. We know that he's coming from a pure place, but it's like, how do you deal with the aftermath of when you were so evil for so long and you did all these just insanely atrocious things? How do you accept this guy now? Because, I mean, on one hand, you don't want to reject him because then that would probably turn him right back to what he was. But to me, that would have been a really cool new story arc they could have explored,
And I think they should explore something like that with Ray's, going forward with Ray. I think that would be cool, and that would be something different, you know. Um, However, like with this whole, see, so when we first see Kylo, okay, he's in his village. We see his immense power, like Poe shoots at him, and then he freezes like the blaster bolt like in midair, and he just holds it there the whole time while he's doing this thing. He's got it suspended in midair, and then they wipe out basically this whole village. Um, I think by the time we get to the point where he kills Han, it's like, okay, that had to be the moment that he can't be redeemed from, and we all said that. It was like,
Yeah.
okay, he killed Han. Like, you saw the anguish in Chewie. Ray was hurt by it. I mean, like, and we are as fans, because like, we all love Han. So it was just like, man, killed his father, man. It's like, yeah, he's got to go at this point. And that's why I felt like that would have been the thing where, for Ray, where it's like, okay, I've seen the things that he's done. I've witnessed some of the stuff. I've heard about it, but also I can feel something different. And then also, add to that, and I just thought about it, but it's her master's kid.
Yeah.
It's Leia's son. So that adds another layer of like, okay, can I really do what must be done? Can I really kill him? Because there's so much on the line with, if I let him live or die. And I think for Ray, that would have been a great, if David were here, he would probably say, it would help her earn the fans respect. Her character will earn the fans respect a little bit more, because it's like, okay, before, everything kind of seemed relatively easy for her, and it's like we really don't see her struggle much. But to put her in a situation of, don't want to say necessarily morality, but like, between a rock and a hard place, if I could just use that analogy, like that would be really compelling. Like you said, Eric, where no different than if Kylo had been redeemed. Well, he did get redeemed, but then he had to go back. So, and it's like, that was the thing. It's like, okay, he got redeemed for a hot second, and then we saw him as Ben Solo for like 12 minutes, which he barely had any lines. And, it's just like, we really didn't get a chance to see him as Ben. So it's almost like, what did you redeem him for?
Well, that was well, but then again, you could say the same thing about Vader, though. Vader had that little tiny conversation at the end, and it's just like, tell your sister I love her. And then,
yeah, but see, Vader's thing was more like, okay, he was self-sacrificing though. Like,
well, yeah,
that was
right. It actually had
exactly. It was
exactly.
like
It had
that
purpose.
weight.
Well,
Yeah,
but the same thing could be said with Ben, because he was necessary to help defeat Palpatine. So, I mean,
yeah, but I mean, like, the way he changed, it was like, okay,
it was instant. It was kind of
it was
like,
just like, hey, kid. He turns around and it's Han. And it's just like, okay, it's never really explained how Han got there. Like, oh, it's never said that, oh, Leia was force projecting that image to him.
Right.
It never,
We had to get that.
we had to kind of, yeah, exactly. So it was kind of like, and like you said before in times past, everything was rushed. The pacing of that movie was so fast. We didn't get a chance to really feel anything. So at least with Vader thing, that whole, we always talk about that whole last little third of the movie. I want to say like maybe fourth of the movie is more like when he's sister. So you have a twins, like that whole, from that moment on, like the stakes just went up monumentally, because up until that point, Vader had no clue he had another child, by the way. Barely knew he had Luke at that point, but now he's like, okay, now he realized that Leia's out there. And now he's probably got to be wondering, like, man, she was like standing right next to me, like in A New Hope, and I had no idea. Not to mention, like, he's been going around, like, as we see in the comics, he's been terrorizing everybody and wiping folks out who knew that Luke existed, and that, and who knew about the whole thing with Pat. So that whole scene when Luke says, never, and he gets into that battle with Vader one last time, and then Vader has to make the decision: do I let another one of my, loved ones basically either die or succumb to the dark side and go through this torture that I've been going through? Like, and you see the conflict that he's had pretty much even since when they met on that bridge. So
that's exactly what I was gonna say. That's like
everything kind of culminated. Yeah, everything culminated to that one moment where it was just like, okay, he's having this lightsaber duel with Rey on the remnants of a Death Star, a Star Destroyer, and then that was a Death Star.
Yeah, it was
a
Death Star.
And then he's like, okay. So then it's like, oh, okay. So now, yeah, you can say that when she stabbed him and she infused some light side into him, that was kind of supposed to be the turn. Yeah, it was cheap though, in my opinion. I mean, it was clever. I give it to him. It was clever how they kind of did that, especially since she used that ability early in the film with the snake, which I think that was kind of like a foreshadowing in a way.
That was completely, but that was it. They just didn't do it properly. It wasn't actually. I think that everything that they did, from the Han appearing to him, and you have the whole like repeated dialogue, but this time it means something different, to the Leia thing, to Rey basically using the Force healing on him, and that just imbues him with light side energy and all that. That was all really great stuff. But the problem is, and I think this is what you're getting at, is there was no setup for it. And so therefore the payoff is like, you're more bewildered than anything else.
Exactly.
Well,
then he shows up and he's like in these regular clothes, He's got like, something from the Gap on. Like, okay.
He's got like jeans and a t-shirt. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, basically.
He's got like his little turtleneck. He's
he went to J. Crew or something and grabbed something off the rack and popped up on out there on Exegol. Like, okay.
Maybe that TIE fighter had to change of clothes or something, man. He's got a little Lando in him. Lando was kind of like his uncle in a way, so he's got a little fashion sense. Dragonfly says basically this would give Kylo Ren a real Revan vibe, and that's I think something that they were consciously thinking of when they were writing all this stuff. But again,
especially kind of, he looks like Revan.
I know, especially the mask thing. Yeah, he's very
That's
reminiscent.
What I thought it was when I first saw it.
I know. I was thinking the same thing. But I mean, look, you had that, you had the whole kiss thing, you had all this stuff. Like I said, a lot of the elements I thought were cool, because another way they could have gone with this, which if they had kept him dark, which this to me would have been really intriguing, because a lot of people were kind of like, okay, she kisses him and all this stuff. It's like, well, where's the context for that? Which is true. Where is the context for that, right? I mean, this guy has done nothing but all these horrific things. And, I mean, this is the complete Tina Turner moment here. where it's basically like, you know what? You're this crazy abusive guy, and I just can't get enough of it for some reason. But
Right.
beyond all that, what I think would have worked if they wanted to pursue that angle, the Raylo as they like to call it, right? If they wanted to do that, what really would have been cool is if he had been dark, she had been light, they had fallen in love, but they're on opposite sides. It's like there is so much story potential there because that's something we've never seen in Star Wars ever.
Yeah, right.
And it's kind of like both of them would constantly be trying to get the other one to join them, but they would be bound by their own, internal belief system or just what they think is the right thing to do for the galaxy and find themselves on opposite ends. That would have been cool.
One of the great times I've seen that within recent years was in Black Panther. Okoye and I forgot her husband's name, but in the Black Panther movie, the first one.
Oh yeah, yeah.
When he's got the rhino and he's about to, and they're having that big battle, and he's like, well, technically, he believed that Killmonger was right, so he was really on Killmonger's side. Of course, Okoye is still like, well, I'm still loyal to T'Challa, and so they kind of come at an impasse. And he asked her, he's like, "Would you really kill me?" And she was just like, without question. I was just like, "Dang!" Like, but that's your husband, and it's like, but look, be that as it may, I love you, but my loyalty is to this. And see, that to me is great storytelling. Because how do you
balance those two? And that's the thing that would have, I think that would have made, if they wanted to pursue that angle, that would have been the better way to do it, for that.
Absolutely.
But I mean, again, I think a lot of this whole thing stems from the fact that they had to try to retcon this as best they can. They were then forced to rush through a lot of different plot points, which is one of the things that I said, look, there's a lot of things. I mean, it's a mixed bag because on one hand, one of the things that everybody said before The Rise of Skywalker came out was, man, it would suck to be the guy making this film because you have so much you have to tie up in just that sequel trilogy, much less put a punctuation at the end of the saga. I mean, there's a lot of responsibility in that, but I think that if they had just maybe tried to lose a few things, they could have maybe made it work where you just slow the pacing down a little bit, just deal with what was there. Of course, obviously, we can go back to the lack of planning and all the stuff that the woulda, coulda, shoulda, but if we're just talking about what's JJ going to do, because he's basically inherited this mess, right? And that's...
Yeah. And that's the thing, though, because, you almost have to kind of wonder, and even Adam was saying this in the interview that, even while they were shooting, they still didn't know, where this was going.
Yeah. And
that just once again shows you to the leadership that Kathleen Kennedy, I told you was going to come up.
Well, it's a thing. It always does.
That Kathleen Kennedy is look, you're the studio. You have to make sure that this stuff is coming out right. You already fired Colin Trevorrow. You brought JJ back to finish it up. And it's just kind of like, all right, did you meet with the minds and say hey, this is the best way to do this and, really look at this? Because even Adam was just kind of like, okay, yeah, we had to figure out this whole dyad thing. And, it was just like, you're throwing a bunch of things in there and you're expecting the fans to just know what this stuff is. Even the hardcore fans, because I could see if there was a prophecy or something like that we've heard about, in the Phantom Menace about a dyad, and you want to bring that back to tie it in. Okay, fine. But this came out of nowhere. Well, what the heck is that?
Oh, man. It so came out of nowhere. I remember when we were watching it, and I remember when that was brought up. And I'm sitting there I swear I probably took at least a minute and a half while the movie is going. And I'm thinking, man, was was that brought up in something? Where was that? Was that an expanded universe thing? Like because
Yeah,
it's like you
exactly.
said, they did it so matter of factly that you were just like,
Yeah.
it was almost like you should have
We
heard
were
of it
supposed to
before.
know. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Like, you should know about this.
Right. And I remember
Did
just
Dooku talk
thinking,
about this too?
exactly. I'm like going back and forth in my head, like, was this a thing? Did I forget? And
Right.
it was finally it was something that was just introduced. And
Yeah, to
then,
try to explain it.
well, here's what makes it worse. What makes it even worse, what I really hate, like, okay, if they wanted to do that, if they wanted to pop this thing up, right?
Mhm.
It would have been nice if it had been a mystery to everybody in the film, too.
Yeah.
Like if Palpatine had been like, whoa, I didn't know. But he was like, oh, well, okay, fine. So you guys, formed a dyad. Now, what was a surprise to him was the fact that it was powerful enough for him to be regenerated. That was a surprise. But what irked me a little bit was the fact that it was a surprise. So now I'm going, okay, great. You got all these guys that understand this concept, and yet it's never been mentioned anywhere. Like, it wasn't even some obscure thing in a comic somewhere. I would have even been like, okay, I might have praised them for that. Because it would be like, oh, look at what a great fan these guys are. It was some, like, random comic that came out in, like, 1994 or whatever. I would have been on board with that. Right? But
Exactly.
the fact...
No, I mean, and that was the thing. It's just so, like, when Adam was recanting, like, all the stories of, how all this kind of came to be. And it's just kind of like, yeah, we didn't know what this is going to, I thought it was going to be this. It ended up being this. Like, there was supposed to be no Ben Solo. There was supposed to be, Ray was supposed to be basically a Kenobi, possibly, or at least no one, which to me would have been the better off thing. It's like, and then she can start her own thing. She's not
Yeah,
necessarily tied to any previous character. But then once again, you kind of have to explain why the heck is this girl so powerful so soon? So it's like,
that's why I was on board with the Palpatine thing. First of all, because it was interesting. It was a very interesting direction. Secondly, again, it's lazy writing, but it does explain the power, and it does excuse a little bit of that Mary Sue thing happening.
Yeah. Yeah, I just, but I really would have loved to have seen what it should have been. I mean, we've said this a lot about, a couple things in that film because, when you look at the sequel, I mean, not the sequel, the prequel trilogy, Revenge of the Sith was by far like the best film.
Mm-hmm.
And then when we look at the sequel, like Rise of Skywalker, arguably could be the worst film, even though it was the longest. Because you're throwing so much stuff in there now. I think they just kind of just dumped everything in there and just trying to hurry up and explain it all. And it had the potential to be really good.
Yeah, it did, and there's a lot of good things in it. I mean, I think that there was some definitely cool elements in it. And here's what's really weird about that movie, because we said this both times we review, actually all 3 times, because The Rise of Skywalker was the only one where we actually also did a non-spoiler review, because our show just happened to be on the day that we saw it. So we ended up doing a non-spoiler review, then a spoiler review, and then, of course, part of the What Is Star Wars series this past year, we did it again. But the thing that's really interesting was we talk about, I mean, we basically torpedo the movie, right? I mean, we talk about how terrible it is, and it's bad storytelling, and pacing was horrible, all this stuff. Yet, we always talk about how much we enjoy the movie. I think that that's really funny, and I think a lot of that is because there are some good things in it.
The good things that do happen are really good.
Yeah. But again, I think that a lot of it, I mean, it's funny because when I first saw this whole interview thing, none of it surprised me. Well, I mean, at this point, nothing in Lucasfilm surprises me anyway, but it felt like that was, again, I really wish that I could say, hey, they really pulled one on us. You know, it was a lot of misdirection, but it goes back to what you were saying earlier, that if this thing had been planned, much like the Vader arc, we would have seen seeds of that. And I mean, in their defense, you did a little bit in The Force Awakens and even The Last Jedi. The Last Jedi is probably where you saw the biggest ones, because that was where you could see Kylo really struggling with, you know, wanting to. It's like he wanted Rey with him, and he was partially struggling with, I wish I could just go to the light. I wish, because, you know, he was talking about, look, even he says in the film, look, man, I killed my dad. I mean, I've just done too much. I mean, even if I wanted to go back, it just isn't going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, even on the onset of the film, you know, which I thought was, to me, that was one of the best parts about The Last Jedi was, and when they were attacking, and you know, Kylo's flying around, he's flying his interceptor, and he's like picking people off left and right, and then he gets to the point where he senses Leia.
Yep.
And he's like, okay, it was easier for him to kill his dad, in my opinion. It's like he already had that kind of made up in his mind. I felt like he kind of said those words to more or less lure him in. But with Leia, I really felt like he was like, you know, that's mom though. Like, you know, and every
your mom, dude.
Kind of,
I mean,
yeah, every son is kind of like, you know, you can't. There's certain things you just don't do to mom. You know,
yeah,
it's just you can't cross certain lines with mom. So what he was thinking about was like, okay, can I really do this? And I love that. And then when someone else took that shot, he got angry.
Yeah.
And it was like, you know, you don't know if and for a second, I didn't know if he was angry because, okay, crap, I didn't want anything to happen to my mom, or if anyone was to do it, it should be me.
Right. Yep.
So, and I was robbed of that, you know, in a way. So I love that aspect of Kylo because we still see, like you said, we still see him struggling. And then, of course, you know, when he has a conversation with Rey, when they go see Snoke. Oh no, was it Snoke? When he has a conversation with Rey, and he's just like, let the past die, and he's just kind of like, you know, just let it all go, just come with me, and we can just do our own thing. I love that aspect of it because it's kind of like he wants to kind of just forget about it all. Now, I thought that was a really nice way of looking at it for him. Because when Vader offered it to Luke, I don't think he really wanted necessarily to rule the galaxy at that point. When he said, you know, we could rule the galaxy as father and son. Like, I don't know if that was Vader's real point. I just thought that he needed somebody powerful enough just to get Palpatine out of the way. You know, he knew that, okay, my bloodline, my kid.
But I think that was the case, though, because you have to go back to the way, and this is why I think that Anakin was a little bit, I mean, there's a lot of similarities with Kylo in a sense, but where they differ is that Anakin always wanted to do the right thing. He wanted to, you know, prevent his loved ones from dying, and he wanted to bring peace to the galaxy and all this other stuff. And they foreshadow this, of course, in Attack of the Clones and moving on, is that, you know, he's basically like, well, then everybody should be made to do this, right? I mean, somebody should have the power so you don't have all the squabbling bureaucracy and be made to do it. And he thought that Palpatine was the guy. And then, of course, he found out very quickly that Palpatine wasn't the guy. So instantly, when he was lied to and he was betrayed and all this stuff, he's like, okay, that's it. I'm taking this guy down. Now all I have to do is find somebody who can help me do it. And pretty much right the wrongs of the galaxy. That was Anakin's thing, even as Vader. And I think that that's very much what he was planning on doing. Like, look, we can get rid of Palpatine. We can rule the galaxy doing what we should do and move on from there. Whereas Kylo, he just, it's really hard to say what he wanted to. I mean, he did talk about, I want to finish what you started and all this stuff, but he was so unhinged that
Yeah.
I think he just wanted the power. Like, I don't even think he was thinking of the good of the people and all that other stuff. I think he just wanted to be the guy,
That, I think, it is his ego. I think it was just because I think it was one like, okay, it's kind of like to be in the pressure of, some famous athlete or rock star or something like that, right? It's like your parents are Leia and Han.
Right.
Your uncle is Luke Skywalker. And who are you? You know what I mean? Like, you almost have to, like, who are you going to be? What? Oh, and by the way, your grandfather's Darth Vader. So, again, it's like you have all these people who are immensely respected / feared and powerful within their own right. And it's like, okay, Kylo just seems to be the guy. He's like, okay, I just want to be, I'm as powerful as them, but also like, I don't want to be in their shadow. I kind of want to forge my own path and be my own man. I don't want to, oh, you're Han and Leia's boy, or you're,
right.
Vader's grandson. Like, I want to, I mean, he liked that fact because at least Vader was like, okay, like Vader kind of forced people, no pun intended, to give him his respect in a way. And I think that's why he had such a problem with issue with Luke too, because it's like when he looked up and he saw Luke with the lightsaber, he probably thought that like, okay, either Luke thinks I'm a threat to his glory, or I'm not good enough, so he wants to kill me or something like that. Like his whole mind is kind of like you said, is unhinged, is kind of twisted. So he's in this whole state of like, all right, I just want to be left alone to kind of do my own thing. Because obviously, like, I can't be with my parents. I'm not good enough for my uncle. I feel like my grandfather is the only person who will understand me, but he's dead. So, I was just ascending. And
don't forget, there was supposed to be scenes with a Vader Force Ghost or whatever talking to Kylo. I mean, once again, they get rid of everything that would have given us context. And I think you're right. I mean, I think that he pretty much is like, look, like you said, I really don't fit in anywhere. So I just want to be left alone to do my own thing, to forge my own path, forget about all this stuff. Because I think what it comes down to is he just didn't really want to live up to the expectations of all these great, noble
lineage,
people
basically
around him. Yeah, I mean, he has to live up to a lineage, and he was just rejecting all that.
Yeah, that's why Snoke was just like, I thought you were going to be powerful enough, to be the next Vader, but you're just some scared boy in a mask. I mean, it was just like, geez. Like,
I know, it's like
God.
Harsh much.
Like,
but here's the thing, and this is what's so funny about it. I honestly think that that's why he joined and eventually overtook the leader and became the guy in the Knights of Ren, right? The Knights of Ren being Kylo Ren. That's why he changed his name. It gave him that identity. It gave him his own destiny, his own thing.
Yeah.
Where I think that this is separate and apart from anything. And that's part of why, I mean, look, I think part of the reason why he was taking Luke down and what even set him on the path in the first place is because Luke came a little unglued there for a minute too. It's like, oh, I sense darkness in you, so I'm going to kill you. Mm-hmm. Luke is a little... He's a little oversensitive to sensing the dark side, I think.
Well, especially within his family, because I get it though. He's like, look, if you were any other person, I probably would try to turn you and try to correct it, but this Skywalker thing, we're too powerful. Like he already knows.
Well,
like, all right.
I mean, what's funny about that is that I half expected him, when Ray started showing a little darkness. I'm like, you better be careful. He might try to draw on you.
Well, especially when he utters that line. There's only one other time I've seen somebody with that much,
He's lucky that he chose to just like freak out and run away or whatever instead of like, all right, you got to go. I'm sorry.
Yep.
You're a little too powerful. You're just too powerful to live. And I think that's where it really gets interesting. And again, I mean, there's just so many different directions they could have gone with, because they laid out.
Us talking this out, it's kind of like, man, like, why didn't they? It's like as we're talking about it, it's like,
and what's funny, exactly, because what's funny is we don't script these at all. In fact, in order to keep the conversation spontaneous, and the whole reason why we did the show in the first place, we only loosely prepare stuff. I mean, we just, here's the topic, here's what we're going to talk about, and whatever happens live happens. And it is funny that when I, before we actually went on, when I was just thinking about this stuff in my head, mostly like, how am I going to kick this off? I really wasn't thinking in terms of all of this stuff. And it literally is in the course of the conversation that you're just like, man, there's so many, because here's the thing. And this is something you pointed out with some of your points I pointed out. And that is that the building material is there, right? They actually gave us enough nuggets, enough story arc points, just different elements that they could have built upon to make something really, really high quality. And they dropped the ball. It's like having the ingredients for a perfect cake and you burn it.
Mm-hmm.
No, that's not a pun for Anakin, by the way. You're yelling at your cake. I have the high ground, But it's shameful because, as we're having this conversation, it's like, oh man, it's actually worse than I thought.
Yeah, exactly. And here we are. We're not even filmmakers.
I know. We're not. Yeah.
We can think of like all this, glare, and it's like, you guys have probably paid like hundreds of thousands of dollars to, to do this stuff for a living.
Well, I think they're too close to it. I mean, well, there's two things that I think, because that's a good point. I think there's two things that you have to look at as far as why are these professionals so bad at this, right? And there's really three reasons. One, and this actually is the core reason for why the other two reasons exist. The first one is they're not really dialed into Lucas's vision. They don't really understand. They understand the parts. They understand the what. They just don't understand the why. And I think that that's critical. And this is something that you can talk about in specificity, which is these other two reasons. One, they're trying too hard to make a blockbuster. They're trying to replicate the Star Wars success. They're trying to make a successful Star Wars film, which is something that, once again, it goes back to Lucas's vision. He was never setting out to do that. It just happened because he made good, timeless films, right? And the other reason, which I just alluded to, is the fact that they're just too close to it. Now they're second-guessing themselves, and they're, like I said, they're trying to make this blockbuster, and they're trying to figure out what the fans want. See, Lucas never really cared about... That's the ironic thing. Lucas never cared about the fans. I mean, he appreciated the fans, but he never... he wasn't looking for fan approval.
Right.
It's like, no, this is my vision. They're my movies. Screw you.
Yeah.
Basically.
I mean, well, and that, I think they're right on the head as far as, they're looking at like, okay, we need to make X amount of dollars for this to be deemed successful.
Right.
Instead of saying like, we need to make this script like this to be successful, for it to be a good story, for it to actually make sense and be really compelling and good and, It's like, wow. And then the money will take, it's almost kind of like when we always tell kids, you know, don't go trying to find a job that's going to pay you amount of money. Do what you love to do, and the people will pay you for it. It's the same concept. It's like just do the story that's actually really good, and then people will come flocking because the word will get out. Like, man, the story was just like. I mean, you hear about this all the time. Like, you hear about people with Netflix, these Netflix movies that come out. It's even crazy now because there's been this huge explosion on Tubi where especially from the Detroit area, because you have a lot of people who want to make films here in Detroit, and they're putting their stuff out on Tubi. Now, granted, the production value is abysmal. However, like when you actually can understand the story, if you can see it and or hear it, uh, due to the production problems. However, if you actually can like figure out what the story is, the stories are pretty good and compelling. But it's just they just don't have the resources and someone who's skilled enough to actually bring it to life the way that it should. But the writing is phenomenal.
Well,
So
the thing is, what they should do, they should just start making short films first. Because like I've watched a ton of short films on YouTube, and they're incredible. I mean, they got the production value of a Hollywood blockbuster because they know what they're doing.
well, yeah, I mean, most of these people aren't really truly film students anyway. Like somebody bought a DSLR camera and they're like, "Ooh, I can
right.
shoot a movie."
Yep.
It's
know.
that, and that's where I'm getting at. It's like it's those people. um, they feel like, oh, because I have a drone, yeah, we can add a drone shot. It's not even needed. They're just throwing in there because you have it. Stuff like that. But I mean, but the actual stories are good, and it's amazing how everybody's like talking about like, oh man, do you see this on Tubi? And I'm like, when did Tubi become the thing? But it's like because of the stories that are being told that people cannot really identify with.
It's because it's easy, right? Because Prime is another thing. Like with Netflix, it's funny because everybody gets all cranked up about, oh, I got a Netflix approved camera, blah, 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 or whatever. None of that matters unless you're actually shooting a Netflix produced movie. That's what that means. But it's even when you submit your own stuff, it's harder. Like Netflix is a little bit more of a gatekeeper. Prime, not so much. You can get your stuff on Prime. It's not as hard as Netflix, but Tubi is just, I mean, it's like YouTube in that sense.
Yeah, basically.
They'll basically take any content. So it's not like, and the problem is much like a YouTube, although at least with YouTube, you have the benefit of the fact that it's the second largest search engine in the world. So you have, if you can get noticed through the algorithm and stuff and you can make it work for you, it's pretty easy to get an audience for something like that. Tubi, though, it's kind of like, okay, you can put the thing out there, but who's going to see it? How are they going to find it? There's no real search engine kind of a thing. I mean, there is a search feature on it, but yeah.
Sure. And people just market it. They just go on their social media platforms, have
right.
their friends.
And they're bragging like they just, got it released on like Paramount or something. But here's the thing that goes along with what you were saying about the Lucas thing, though, is the fact that when Lucas did it, it was a passion, not a business. Yeah. And that's the difference. Of course, he knows what he's doing. And so he was arguably the most successful independent producer of all time. But I think what's really remarkable about all this is the fact that he's just really good at storytelling and filmmaking. But he's not doing it to make money. He's doing it, it's almost like a hobby. Like if he had another job, he'd still try to be doing this on the side. That's the difference.
Yeah, absolutely. But, as we kind of like wrap this up, I really love the fact that Adam Driver actually, we all kind of figured, well, it's not even figured. We all knew that this stuff wasn't planned out. But see, now more and more we're starting to figure out to what degree and how far or how deep it goes, and that's what was really, for me, really interesting. And that's why we wanted to talk about it tonight, was because we often talk about like, oh yeah, they didn't plan, the direct, and once again, like you're hearing it from the actors themselves who are telling you like what actually transpired. And now, and it further, illuminates the reason why we see the issues that we see in the sequel trilogy is because of the lack of preparation, the lack of planning, um, and just really not having any real direction. And so hopefully, we've been talking about, we've kind of brought it up, that there are new films coming. There's another Ray centric movie that's coming up. We don't know if it's a trilogy or not. It's just so far, as far as we know, it's a standalone. But we have James Mangold, who's going to explore the whole Force thing. Um, and then we still don't know if Mandalorian season 4 is going to be a series or a film.
No, but what we do
So
know
hopefully going
is that
forward,
apparently it's starting to shoot.
yeah,
We just were talking about, we just shared an article today, so I don't know what that's all about. But either
yeah,
way, it's there. Whether it is a film or a series, like it should be, we'll have to see.
yeah,
But
definitely,
yeah, I mean, and again, look, and obviously we want to know what you guys are thinking. We want to know what you're thinking specifically about Adam Driver's comments. I'm going to leave it sort of vague like that because I just want to get you guys' thoughts on what he said during the interview. From a matter of summation, I'll say that the interesting thing is I like the elements that we got. Like, I like the redemption. I didn't think I would, but I ended up liking it. However, that does not excuse the fact that they handled it wrong, though. They didn't give us a context they should have given us. They paced things so quick that it was just like they
yeah,
were cramming in everything that they could, to give us this stuff. And so even though the concepts that they introduced I thought were actually good, the execution, once again, what a surprise, because that was even Lucas's problem with a lot of the prequels stuff. As he
hmm,
just, great story, just poor execution, right? So let us know what you guys are
right,
thinking. You have a lot of ways you could do that. You still have about maybe 20 more seconds or so left in the chat to let us know any final thoughts you might have from our live audience watching us. And then, of course, you also have the comment section that you can use to do, well, you could do a couple of things in that, actually. You can let us know what you're thinking of Adam Driver's comments, what you think of what we said tonight, if there's anything else that you think that we should talk about following up on this. I mean, there's all kinds of things. And then, of course, we can also move this over to
I'll,
our Discord and
I'll
comment
actually like to
there.
add, if I'll actually have to add for the fans. Do they feel like Kylo should have been redeemed, or should he have
Oh, I'll
stayed?
put a poll. I'm going to put a poll up as soon
Yeah.
as this thing is done, about that.
Okay.
Do you think that you should have been redeemed or not? So, yeah, that's a poll that's going up in our community tab, so, look out for that, because I'm really curious. And, of course, on Monday's show, we'll let you guys know, the results of that. So, yeah, I mean, it should be pretty fun. But, again, this goes to show that now it's been long enough now that the cracks are showing. Because, by the way, this is I should have actually brought this up at the top of the show, but it was 6 years ago today that The Last Jedi was released.
Oh wow.
Yeah. December 15th, 2017, The Last Jedi was
Wow.
released. So it was around this time that we were probably in the car, all bewildered, not saying anything,
What the
wondering,
heck did we
you
just
know,
watch?
I mean, pretty much it was a repeat of Poe. It's like, do you talk first? Do I talk first? It's like, who's going to say something, right?
Right.
Because the problem
Yeah.
is we're driving down the road and it's like, okay, somebody has to say something because it's just going to open this floodgate and we only have so long before, I'm dropping you
Yeah.
off or whatever. So But yeah, that was really interesting. So I thought I would just share that with you guys too. I probably should have posted something, on our social medias to that effect, but I don't know. I've been really sloppy. I'll admit I've been a little bit sloppy on some of the social media stuff lately, but I'm going to try to get better with it and give you guys some more content and discussion. So join us Monday night at 8 o'clock. Who knows what we're talking about? I mean, there's so many things that are happening right now in the news. All this stuff comes out. And it's funny because as soon as we talk about something, like we just did this whole thing about season 4 of The Mandalorian, and then today more information comes out. So the wonderful thing about Star Wars is there's always something to talk about with this saga. So join us Monday, 8 o'clock. With that, I'm Eric Mansell.
I'm Daryl Sanders.
May the Force be with you.
Always.
Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Be sure to follow us on Twitter @HeadToHeadSW. Submit your questions for our next show. Visit our official website at headtoheadswpodcast.com. Until next time, may the Force be with you, always.